Muy bien, una vez que escuché.
Very well. Once we hear the presentations, it's better for us so we can ask better questions. What we want to talk about here is about applications and how are we able to extract this renewable energy whose potential that we're talking about here in Chile is large. Now, I always have an issue when they start adding gigawatts because they start adding them, gigawatts of PV, then they put wind power. The issue is that hydrogen is not a power, but it's energy. So we forget to multiply that power by the plant factor, right? Which is something that everyone was discussing this morning. But how can this be if PV electricity is much cheaper than wind power? Nevertheless, the LOH of hydrogen turns around because the plant factors of wind plants is much higher than the PV. So it's an issue, and that was clearly explained. If I can have an electrolyzer that works 6 hours per day, that will have a cost. If I can make it work 12 hours a day or 18, that is a whole different cost, which is again the and so let's not forget. Everyone says, "Oh, Chile has so many gigawatts. Please don't do it. Please do not sum everything up. Do not add it. What you can add is the type of energy that Chile has, which is around 10,000 terawatts hours per day. It's a lot. And if I translate this into potential hydrogen, what GIZ did, what Rodrigo and Corfo did, they created this Chilean roadmap. And if I take all these famous gigawatts and I multiply them by the hours of time, then I get 10,000 terawatts, which accounts for approximately 7% of global energy consumption. So this small country could actually could account for the 7% of global energy. So, or substitute it. We're currently contributing with 23% of the copper in the world. We have reserves of 50% of lithium. So, this is a tremendous industry. Now, the national strategy for hydrogen strategy by 2050 wants to seeks to use 15% of that potential. Do not be afraid. We're talking about 300 gigawatts that we must install, and we do need to make investments because that is expensive. So, we are talking about being large exporters. So the question is, do we really need to export the energy, or shall we create products that use energy? For example, the steel industry is right there where the energy is there where the coal was at.
Pero esas plantas están.
They took the mineral, but those plants are on top of the coal mine. So it's interesting to see on CAP how we, instead of doing exports of energy, how we export green steel. So, Patricia, what does CAP do in a long term? On the one hand, you probably tell us about that a large amount of energy you need it for this reduction of iron oxide to steel, right? Which we currently do with coal, right? We burn it and CO2 takes that through the stacks. And surely then CAP consumes much energy in their operations. One is smelting, and the other part is transport. Right, these haul trucks, etc. How do you see this on a medium term? What do you need to decarbonize first, and then what later? Can you hear me? Yes, no. In the long term, goals are very ambitious in CAP. I told you a bit of detail of Huachipato. We want to produce green steel there, but nevertheless, there's also plans for the mining company to reach green mining, and the world will require this too. And part of that production of the mining company currently supplies Huachipato. We self-supply with the pellets produced, that CMP produces, and send that to Huachipato. And beyond doubt, Huachipato will require a green product in the future. And just like Huachipato, many other steel and iron companies will need that in China and in other places. So mining companies or the mining industry is also aiming to turn into greener mining processes, right, in parallel to what Huachipato is doing. And they have another roadmap, but we are going along that road. And regarding our consumption, And what are we doing now? We currently have plans. At least we have self generation of power strategy for self generation of power. As you said, we're the main consumers. We're the fourth energy power consumption companies. We're fourth in terms of Grupo Cap Group, and we think we must have a renewable energy part in our portfolio. We're very close to that. There's a significant solar project near, right? And we are creating this PV and solar energy panel project, and we believe that by implementing and complementing with solar energy, we can reach great results and to control that variable a bit more, right, than what we have now, our own generation. Another question, Patricia. It happens many times, even more in the mining industry, that we say, okay, the mine site has 100% renewable energy, and we forget that what they're talking about is electricity, power. So we forget about all the other fuels. It's it's propaganda that's fake, right? You must say, instead of renewable energy, you must say renewable electricity. In the copper industry is 50% electricity, and the rest are fuels, and those are the hard ones to work with. And the cap part, how much is energy, how much is electricity, and how much is fuels? Do you have a ratio there? I don't have the exact data on hand now, just to give you a number, but we do have lines of work. We have the energy that or power that we purchase, right? We have the use of scope 1 and 2, and we have lines of work that aim for decarbonization, especially to respond to your question on electromobility. There's two pilot projects to have dual trucks with the use of fuel and gas, dual energy trucks. This pilot's already started at our mine sites, and we have a plan starting this year to have all the personal transport bus for them to be EVs, electric vehicles. And we've installed stations for refueling these buses, different stations. We're actually incorporating electrical shovels in the mine site. Everything about scope 1, 2, and 3. In that, we're implementing plans, and in scope 1, we've also considered how we will evolve from coal towards renewable energy with renewable energies that are under our operation. Yes, because in scope 1, you use electrical energy to move many things, and then use it for reduction. For reduction, you're using fuel. You're using the chemical formula, and for heating too. So you need heat, you need to reduce, and you also need electricity. So, and that's only in scope 1. So there's much to be done, and it's broad, right? Thank you very much. It's important not to forget about fuels, because in the case of Chile, it's 100% imported, these fossil fuels. Significant. They all come from abroad. We do not manufacture them, so that is a gap. Yes, one of the largest challenges for us in scope 1 is to execute this soon, and to move the levers for scope 2 and 3, of course. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Paula, this is a question for you and for Francois. The question is, when we see all these wonders you see on screen, and it happens for to many of you, like producers of electrolyzers, you've been working on this for many years, but the electrolyzers is in the chlorine part, right? There's many plants you learn from, right, about electrolysis. So the question is, what are the most important factors that are hampering us from obtaining the customers, the customers that are not putting the down payment for you to start creating gigafactories? Where do you see the issue for the development of green hydrogen? Hello? I think it's quite aligned with what I mentioned at the end of my presentation. There are many factors. First of all, the availability of renewable energies. There's much potential, but we do need to build on the quantity of renewable energy that's necessary to decarbonize, because that is enormous, right? First of all, availability, it has to be at a competitive price. And the second point, which I've spoken about, is about the chicken and the egg dilemma. We do not have the cost of green hydrogen. It's still quite high because there's low demand, and there's low demand because that is still high. The only exit I see for this dilemma is that there's an incentive created for starting this industry. We need to be careful because there are bottlenecks throughout the entire supply chain. If you look at the manufacturing of electrolyzers, the supply used to be almost artisanal, right? Now it's multiplied, this entire development. Even with noble minerals, the supply of them, we don't have that in the world, right? If you need to multiply that by 1,000 times, if you do that, we do not have minerals, right, that were necessary. So you need to build on the entire change, but without an economic logic that works, without this incentive for transition until green hydrogen is cheaper than gray hydrogen and then cheaper than other fossil fuels or other types of molecular energy, we need to do something about it. And this has to be driven by regulations, right? And rules. We spoke about gas blending and the supply of green ammonia fertilizers, which is one part. Brazil has created those type of methodologies with ethanol in the 70s, 80s with the first oil crisis. And after years, we created an industry, or we could have a blend, a mix of how much ethanol, how much gasoline, but this is maintained, and it's a quite strong and robust industry for Brazil. So if we want to industrialize countries, if we don't want industrialization to follow in the developed countries, countries have to have the development policy for creating elements and a domestic demand, and we need to manufacture the plants in South America. Thank you. I'm going to try to do an technological innovation now. Let's see if we can ask Francois. He's right there. Yes. Francois, there's a part in your presentation that you actually skipped, but my question is, you talked about carriers and pipelines. Perfect. I have hydrogen there, but we know that hydrogen, it can be transported through pipelines, through trucks, but when I transfer them into a ship, I need to reduce volatility. So, do you think there are any carriers that look like future champions? In the presentation, you spoke about methanol, ammonia. There are many other things, right? Like ether dimethyl. So, what is the carrier that you think will advance the fastest? Because there are some chemicals that you're trying out, but we still have not figured out how we will work with these large distances for commuting. I don't think we can hear you. Think about the answer. Meanwhile, Francois, we heard you very well last night. Can you talk? Maybe you need to move your hands around a bit, sign language. But anyway, we have a small delay, so we can't really hear you. If not, we'll just continue with another question here, which I do believe is interesting. Oh, can you hear me now? Yes? Without the mic? Could you put your headset on again? Because you used to have it with you, but nope. Can you hear me now? Go ahead, sir. Can you hear me now? Yes. Thank you, and sorry we had an issue. I don't think we have that now. There's different uh, elements that are developing in parallel now, and there's different markets that could use different types of molecules. We've been hearing much about ammonia nowadays, and I believe that the two reasons why we hear so much about ammonia is that there's an existing infrastructure, right? Which makes it easier to use this type of molecule. And the second reason is because there's no coal, right? Methanol, for example, in the molecule. Therefore, it's a molecule without coal, which, well, it's something that we've tried to develop. But I think it's a bit early nowadays to say that there's a champion between the different types of hydrogen carriers.
Thank you very much, Patricia. I want to take advantage to talk to you about public policies. We have to start asking for money. What do we require? What incentives do we have for public policies? I have my doubts. We talk about green taxes. We had Putin's green tax, the price of gasoline duplicated, gas multiplied by 5. And I didn't see a lack of cars on the car. I don't know what order of magnitude are we talking about, but it is important the subsidies that fossil fuels have. Just to have an idea in the order of magnitude, fossil fuels have a subsidy of approximately $500 billion. Biden with 375 is nothing compared the way in which we subsidize fossil fuels. We have MEDCO, the mechanism of stabilization of prices, and it has a gap of $300 billion. How do we motivate this? We want other countries. It is being motivated as public policy. The idea of using green hydrogen, which is a luxury-based fuel. The European Union is without a doubt an example, particularly in hydrogen. They're an important resources with the industries that have promoted this. Could be in Germany, in comparison to our industry, in steel production, there's an important incentive by the German government to convert it 100% towards the green. This is important. We're talking about billions of dollars. There is a challenge to reach that, and there is a contribution at the state level. This is the case of Germany. There has been very high green taxes in the European Union because at the end of the day, we want to promote that. It has supported hydrogen and allow many industries to go in that direction. For Chile, it is different because we're talking about large-scale countries with different economies. Everything that the Ministry of Energy is promoting, electromobility through the Ministry of Transportation. But when we go to a stage of defining a green tax, it will be very challenging, and we will need to speak to all the players. Because with the application of these taxes, it will, as I was saying in my presentation, that it will be non-competitive to similar products based with different taxes. In the case of green taxes, it's going to consider the different industries and the advantage or disadvantage vis-a-vis other products generated in other economies. Promoting green hydrogen is important. We need to deal with the energy grid today in Chile, as we heard in the presentation. by Pablo here, there is no capacity. All these ammonia and green hydrogen implies adding at least a fifth of the capacity that we have of installed capacity. So what we see is that there are no installed capacities to mount these projects upon. And what we see is an enormous potential in the south with wind energy and in the north with solar power. In the north, there's a great deal of infrastructure, but there isn't as much infrastructure in the south. How do we complement this? It is a challenge for Chile because we can promote it with the southern zone. It's talked about a great deal, but little in the north, because ammonia in the north, there is capacities, there are projects that are being analyzed, there are renewable projects. But there is no doubt that the promotion of this government and those to come will be key, because it's already been key in the European Union. Because the minister this morning told us also that we need to use common infrastructure, because if not, each project is going to have to be mini. But it's important in Chile. We did a fruit highway, a wood highway, which has been able to reach the port. And now we're looking for the hydrogen highway. I have a question, Paolo. You are a large company. We are doing new things here. What I have seen in all these projects is that there is a great deal of cooperation. There are projects with at least 10 logos of different companies. How does Tyson accelerate, make these how do you allow, or how do you form acceleration with all these different companies participating? How do you manage energy transformation? What kind of policy does a company like Tyson Group, which is huge, I know you cannot do it by yourselves. Yeah, I don't know if we have a very clear strategy in reference to the economy. We call it the hydrogen economy. For hydrogen economy to work, we need three things: the demand. We've talked about off-takers, the offer. I talked a little bit about technology and infrastructure. We also heard by the minister, we have to, if you have a developed strategy, you can serve the three vertex, which is called a triangle. We begin by the demand. First, we are a major steel manufacturer. Just as Patricia has commented, we have many emissions. And if we have an ambition to create a green transformation and a commitment with the environmental goals, we need to start by home. So we launched a decarbonization program as CAP. We are doing the transition in the utilization of directory reduction, substituting carbon by green hydrogen. The first phase, we have high furnaces. The first phase is to substitute 2,500 millions of tons a year with an investment of 2.5 billion euros underway. That's the first stage, because we produce 11 million tons a year. And you need to maintain the provision, and you need to develop an industrial process to continue operating. We're going to do it in 4 phases. First phase is 2.5 billion euros, 2.5 million tons a year, the 4 phases up to 2025. And that is the process where we're going to contribute for the substantial implementation of electrolysis for the scaling, accelerated scaling. Secondly, offer. we respond with our electrolysis technology. We have the best technology for scaling. I have talked a little bit about this. And thirdly, but not less important, infrastructure. We are in wind energy for tower productions and chemical plants where we provide ammonia plants and methanol. Complementing the responses of the previous question, we're convinced that ammonia is going to be number one transporter of energy carrier, but also methanol could be a solution. We have a great deal of experience. We have ammonia plants for more than 100 years. 1/4 of all the ammonia produced today in the world is done in plants designed and produced by Tyson. That's 1/4 plus methanol and biofuel and downstream demand, offer, and infrastructure. Thank you very much. Francois, I have a question for you. I wonder if I have Francois with us. Can you please bring Francois to play? Are we connected? Or else I have to ask the question. Oh, I want to ask the question. Let's see if Francois is there. All right. The question I had, it's not simple. We're talking about transportation, but ports are fundamental. I know that you manage a port. Port doesn't only have transportation. There are different economic models. It can be a wholesaler. I withdraw ammonia. Is it only one customer, or can I have more than one customer? If the port is only a pipeline, do you buy and sell? Do you buy from different producers? And since they are already a distribution channel, or what do you see as a foresight for ports exporting? We don't want that many ports, but it has to have a function that has a commercial or trade profile where you have clients where you can export through. Yes, the intent should be to have shared infrastructure where you can make available the exporting of ammonia, which could be added to the infrastructure that is already underway or used in different zones. It's very important where the plant is going to be built. Optimally, it should be in the port that's already constructed and with a pipeline close by. The demand is crucial, that the demand is close to the production and the port. That was the optimum environment, right? It should be located in the same place so you don't have to transport hydrogen that is produced and then converted into ammonia and then transported. On one side, where is the local demand that will be utilized locally? And is it going to be exported towards ammonia production close to the port? It is key to have shared infrastructure. And I would like to, before I continue, I would like to open the floor to the public. We have excellent presenters. Please raise your hand if you have any questions. Please ask. There are people with microphones around that will come to you. There you are. There's a person before. As you raise your hands, yes, and there. They're first and they're second. Thank you. A question for CAP. What is the competitive gap between green steel and the conventional steel? Is it 10 or 20% more? And what challenges have you foreseen for this competitiveness? And what reasons would you give to other developers to participate in this competitiveness? We still thank you for the question, but we cannot answer that question yet. We want the green hydrogen to be competitive. And from that standpoint, the pilot is not high. But the important thing is to not have a deficit with that pilot of green hydrogen. The reduction is innovation. And we're associated, as I was saying, with SMS to find the best a path to reach reduction. But this is mainly because the technology is available, applied to different technologies. It is without a doubt our capex for both pilot hydrogen and route and gray. It is something that we have to study. So we have to start by our pilot plant first. Dimensions that are involved. The cost of energy is the most important aspect. Some of the presenters talked about the cost of energy. If that process has a trend, a dropping trend, then we will be able to achieve a more competitive product than what we're offering today. It's going to be more expensive. There's going to be an award, a prize at the end of the day, if the market is willing to pay for it. Like, for example, in Europe, you're paying more to get a greener steel in the construction industry. And this will depend on the market. We know that in Europe they're selling green labeled appliances for homes, and they are more expensive than the traditional ones. People are going to have to be willing to pay for it. We sell to the mining industry. Everything is under evolution right now, and that's why we're starting with a pilot. So we cannot tell you how much more it's going to be. It will depend on the willingness of the market to pay for it. We hope that the gap is minimum, but we hope that the award at the end of the line is a good one, but we don't have a price right now. Yes, Paolo, the electrolyzers are going to be a bottleneck in the development of these projects. And you said you're going to have a capacity to produce 1 giga per year until 2025. We're going to have to understand who you're going to supply electrolyzers to. In fact, this is a continuous development. The chain is 1 giga per year. Until 2025, we multiply it by 5, we reach 5 giga. We have a portfolio of approximately 3 giga right now. With the capacity we have today, we are filled for the next 3 years, and there are options that have been signed that cannot be announced to ensure the capacities for decision making. It can go all the way to 2026 and so on. It can be full. The production is existent. The major challenge right now is that we have suppliers that produce a limited amount, and the entire chain needs to scale. As I said it starts with availability, nickel, particularly after the Russian attack. So there is no more nickel in the market, and there's no availability anymore. But many pieces, plastic pieces, that need to be scaled. Um, there's a industry, and there are elements. Basically, we're talking about the same amount, but we're requesting the entire production to take on a certain scale. So I'm not sure if there were other questions. Yes, a short question, please. I just wanted to know from the hydrogen standpoint, we talk about oxygen. I wanted to know if the metallurgical industry is considering oxygen for combustion. And downstream, do you have carbon capture? I think someone asked that question already. Yeah, in both questions. There are projects underway to capture the carbon molecule and also the use of oxygen as a result of that process. It is part of what we're studying as part of this project. We're reviewing all the uses. There's also a gap between green hydrogen that we will produce in its direct relationship, and we will use that additional hydrogen in the time that's necessary. Just to complement, we are using today pure oxygen, but it's cheaper to take it from the air with PSA. If you have a leftover, great. But to do it specifically, no. If to transport oxygen, it's already a problem. I wanted to give Paolo some time. If you have something that you want to say to close, Paolo, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to present. I think the two messages, one is the scaling, I've seen it many times, regulation for industrial public policies. And finally, the fossil fuel chain has been developed in the last 150 years. And now we need to change the tradition in the next 20 to 30 years. This says a great deal about our challenges. In the next 30 years, what it took the petroleum chain to provide as a result. Our strategy is very aggressive in sustainable growth, decarbonization. We believe that it is important to step up. The entire industry is progressing. We believe it is very important to have a development and be competitive. We believe Chile has an enormous potential, and we, as such, are developing our processes, which are very much focused into our industry. We're not to produce hydrogen, but rather to use it in our productive industry. How other people are going to use it with the use of hydrogen is going to be key to accelerate this process. At least we see how we replace it in our productive chain. I would like to thank Fichtner for producing this. There are always people behind it. Tobias, thank you very much. Carlos Alberto, I see him behind the scenes to joining us all. We'd like to ask a hand for our panelists.
Muchas gracias a ustedes.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's been a pleasure to see you and to hear you, your presentations, and to take advantage of your experiences. It was additional information we did not have before or that present. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Javier, who unfortunately is not here with us now due to technology, but that's one of the challenges of communication. And to strengthen communication, we would like to go to a small break and then we'll come back. Coffee is ready, so please I'd like to invite you to this coffee break, and we'll be back in 30 minutes in the same room.
I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. In the end, it doesn't even matter. so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. In the end, it doesn't even matter. I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. In the end, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. In the end, it doesn't even matter. I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all. In the end, it doesn't even matter.
Shadow to my light, did you feel us? Another star, you fade away. Afraid our aim is out of sight. Wanna see us alive. Where are you now? Where are you now? Where are you now? Was it all in fantasy? Where are you now? We were imaginary.
I know you're scared sometimes. Don't know if you're wrong or right. You've been doing things you never thought you'd do. Taking it day by day. It seems like you lost your way. Even when you win, it still feels like you lose. When your heart is racing at the speed of light, and you feel like you got nowhere else to go. No, I'll hold you till the sun comes in the morning light. Yeah, I'll keep you safe, I'll never let you go. When your heart is racing at the speed of light, and you feel like you got nowhere else to go. No, I'll hold you till the sun comes in the morning light. Yeah, I'll keep you safe, I'll never let you go. I'll never let you go. I wish that you could see what I see. You're so much stronger than what you think. No sleep, cause if you do, then you dream nightmares, but I'll be there for everything. Just think of me. When your heart is racing at the speed of light, and you feel like you got nowhere else to go. No, I'll hold you till the sun comes in the morning light. Yeah, I'll keep you safe, I'll never let you go. When your heart is racing at the speed of light, and you feel like you got nowhere else to go. No, I'll hold you till the sun comes in the morning light. Yeah, I'll keep you safe, I'll never let you go. I'll never let you go. I'll never let you go. I won't say goodbye yet. Can I change your mind? 'Cause I don't think we're finished until I cross the line. 'Cause I can't let you go. I want you to know that I will make you mine. So if I let you keep your love, you know you will. You will. You will. days I wake up and I'm fine. Some days I wake up and I'm losing my mind. I try to remember to feel, 'cause it's gotta hurt so it heals. But when I get that low, 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 oh, I never really know, no, 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 if the feeling's gonna end. I need you to love me when I wake up from the nightmares. Tell me I'm alright. I just need your arms to hold me when I cry, because I'm only human like you. Don't you know I'm only human like you? Human like you. On the surface, I'm good, but inside, it's like someone keeps coloring outside the lines. I try to remember to breathe, 'cause it's only anxiety. But when I get that low, 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 oh, I never really know, no, 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 if the feeling's gonna end. I need you to love me when I wake up from the nightmares. Tell me I'm alright. I just need your arms to hold me when I cry, because I'm only human like you. Don't you know I'm only human like you? I know that I'm safe just staring in your eyes, and I can hide the pain if you don't look in mine, because I'm only human like you. Don't you know I'm only human? I'm human like you. Pieces of my heart, like windows in the dark, looking out for something that's missing. Colors that don't change, all turn to shades of gray, staring in the night for vision. And I shoot up a flare, throw my hope in the air, singing SOS. Can someone save me from all that love? You say you've got enough for the both of us. I'll make it, baby. And I shoot up a flare, throw my hope in the air, singing SOS, singing SOS. And I shoot up a flare, throw my hope in the air, singing SOS. Can someone save me? Can someone save me? Save me, can someone save me? Can someone save me? Save me, SOS. Quiet, it's too loud, my faith is on the ground. You lay down there with me when I'm lonely. touching every scar. You fix the jagged parts. They cut you, but you still wanna hold me. And I shoot up a flare, throw my hope in the air, singing SOS. Can someone save me? I'm all out of love. You say you've got enough for the both of us. I'll make it, baby. And I shoot up a flare, throw my hope in the air, singing SOS, singing SOS. And I shoot up a flare, throw my hope in the air, singing SOS. Can someone save me? Can someone save me? Save me, can someone save me? Can someone save me? Save me, SOS. I won't say goodbye.
Sometimes I wanna run away, cause I can see it from me. But you never know it. I'm feeling something for you. Maybe it's getting stronger. But you never know. I don't wanna say goodbye, cause I really like you, don't you notice? I don't wanna know the one, cause I really need you, baby, love me. I don't wanna say goodbye, cause I really like you, don't you notice? I don't wanna know the when. I don't wanna say goodbye. I don't wanna say goodbye. Sometimes I wanna run away, cause I can see it from me. But you never know it. I'm feeling something for you. Maybe it's getting stronger. But you never know. I don't wanna say goodbye, cause I really like you, don't you notice? I don't wanna know the one, cause I really need you, baby, love me. I don't wanna say goodbye, cause I really like you, don't you notice? I don't wanna know the when. I don't wanna say goodbye. Sorry for what I do. Sorry for feeling like you. Sorry for how you Sorry for what I do. Sorry for feeling like you. Sorry for how you I don't wanna say goodbye.
Do you remember last year, the way we used to touch? And are you thinking about me? Do you miss me so much? I think back to who I was. I don't recognize those days, and I'm still thinking about you and how I miss you so much. You're like a summer wave that I can't take. You're like a summer wave I can't escape. And I wanna go back to those days. You're like a summer wave that I can't take. You're like a summer wave that I can't take. You're like a summer wave I can't escape. And I wanna go back to those days. Do you remember last year, the way we used to touch? And are you thinking about me? Do you miss me so much? I think back to who I was. I don't recognize those days, and I'm still thinking about you and how I miss you so much. It's on my way. Oh, yeah. Thinking about you. I'm thinking about you. You're like a summer wave that I can't take. You're like a summer wave I can't escape. And I wanna go back to those days. You're like a summer wave that I can't take. You're like a summer wave that I can't take.
Was wrong to say I wouldn't change a thing, 'cause in the story of our lives, the best of times through colored glass. I'm here once again, and I'm deep and I'm feeling the pain. So who takes the fall that covers it all again? And if you should call, it's no trouble at all. I'll paint out the sun back where we begun again. I'm here once again, and I'm deep and I'm feeling the pain. So who takes the fall that covers it all again? And if you should call, it's no trouble at all. I'll paint out the sun that
And yell at your friends that are outside for them to sit down.
Sí. Vamos a esperar un minuto y medio más para que logremos cerrar la puerta.
Okay, so we're going to wait for a couple more minutes to begin.
Adelante nomás. Bueno,
I'd like to welcome you to the third panel today, our last panel, right? It is my pleasure to introduce our great friend and collaborator, Carolina Orozco, an extraordinary professional, attorney, and environmental engineer who is accompanying us. She's from Ecuador and she's part of our team that is designing the green hydrogen roadmap for the Republic of Ecuador. And she's here sharing the stage with us to moderate this third panel. Please, a big round of applause for Carolina. In this panel, were victims of the COVID situation. One of our panel members or speakers will join through streaming, and our other panel members are here waiting for their turn. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. I'd like to start by thanking Fitchner for considering me and for inviting me to moderate this panel. It is a pleasure for me to be accompanied by the panel members that I'll introduce. The truth is that they're a luxury panel, but before we initiate this session, I'd like to tell you something. It's been a pleasure to come here and to spend all day looking at all the presentations, conferences, people, company, institutions engaged in this type of industry. It's also been great to be received by the city with an earthquake in this country. It's wonderful how you have the capacity of just remaining sitting down. It's incredible. I was 2 seconds away from taking my shoes off and starting running when I thought, no, I'm going to be ridiculous because everyone is just waiting for the tremor to pass, the earthquake. But the great thing was this panel member here that said, okay, let's continue now. And I was like there with my heart in my hands. So I truly believe that that capacity, it's truly a skill, the Chileans. It's part of the wonders of coming to this beautiful country. So as I mentioned, I'm Ecuadorian. I'm coming from a neighboring country and South America. So the gap and the enormous leap we have in terms of green hydrogen is impressive. I'd like to congratulate you because the expertise and the level that you've presented today of dialogue, of exhibitions when a country like mine and others in the region, except many like Brazil, Chile, etc. We're talking about green hydrogen, but following your example, right? We are sitting down as with Fitchner in the initial preparation of a diagnosis to create a roadmap. And sometimes in neighboring countries in Latin America, we find ourselves with the issue, the surprise that when we do the diagnosis, it's simpler than what we thought of because there's nothing. So it's better to say, okay, we'll have to create everything from scratch, like the case in my country. So it's a true honor to hear all of you or the speakers presenting today and to see how many light years you have, how many years you have ahead of us. It's my pleasure to be part of this panel today. It is the last panel, but I believe that everyone knows the saying about the best is left for later, right? So I think this session will be important. So I'd like to introduce all panel members who will speak not only about the wonderful progress you have in Chile, this country. I'd be quite proud to belong to this industry if I were Chilean. But they're going to talk about pending affairs and opportunities and challenges, opportunities for improvement and challenges in this industry nowadays. So we'll talk about the production of electrolyzers. We'll talk about infrastructure and about projects that are already here, pilot projects and potential projects that we could have in Chile. Without further ado, I'd like to invite our first panel member to the stage. He is Marcelo Merli, engineer. He has a master's degree from the School of Mechanical Engineer from Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile with a specialty in renewable energies. During his 25 years of career focused on the infrastructure and energy sector, he's had experiences in many countries in Latin America and in Europe. And he's currently the director for business development focused on energy, sustainable energy for Chile and the Andean and South Andean region since 2019, and he's representative of Siemens Energy, a member of WEC and the Chilean company of H2 Chile. He'll talk about electrolysis, possible bottlenecks in the supply chain, the plans of OEM manufacturers to increase production, the global distribution of capacities, and the comparison of project announcements and the true capacity for production. So please a big round of applause for Marcelo.
Buenas tardes. En nombre de Siemens Energy, para mí es un placer ser parte de este foro, con lo cual agradezco también a Fitchner y todo el equipo humano que estuvo detrás para hacer posible este tipo de eventos, que creo que son todavía muy relevantes a la hora de entender un poco cómo está avanzando esta nueva industria del hidrógeno. En Siemens Energy comenzamos y yo en particular hace bastantes años, y en temas de hidrógeno y descarbonización, ya más de una década en particular con lo que es electrólisis. Y un poco lo que vamos a compartir acá es nuestra mirada respecto de justamente ensayar una respuesta en relación a si con el avance de la demanda esperada en términos de hidrógeno como por la vía de electrólisis del agua, en función de sustituir el hidrógeno que hoy mayormente se produce y que ahora vamos a ver en los distintos slides, es compatible con la oferta tecnológica que hoy por hoy se está componiendo y que también tiene sus proyecciones. Sin perder de vista que todavía, y nosotros hacemos evaluaciones propias, pero también vemos
We have our proper, but we see different reports, and there's certain things that we must align. So it's not the truth revealed, but it's a perspective with certain values of consensus. Having said that, I'll not go deep into the portfolio, but then during the debate, we can tell you a bit more about what we're doing. The first slide, for those of you that do not know us, they identify us just as Siemens. Siemens Energy is a company with 3 years of business. We're in our third fiscal year, the 176 years of experience. Is a carve out of the entire division, generation and transmission of Siemens. We have global presence in more than 90 different countries. We're more than 91,000 employees. Approx, right? That's 1/6 or more than 16% of the entire global generation is based on our technology. And for many years now, we've been working on decarbonization. That is why our portfolio is mostly focused on that, right? On digitalization, decarbonization. That's why we have turbo machines that already operate with natural gas, with hydrogen, and we have success cases, which I'll comment later on. But we have the vision as a global integrated energy company to become into the most valued company at a global level. And our mission is to support all of our customers and all you and the customers that we have throughout our planet in this transition to more sustainable world based on focus on our purpose. We have a reason for decarbonizing. We haven't done this correctly, and we might improve this based on our skills and technologies to change the idea, to turn these ideas into reality. So, to respond to your question, if it's possible for there to exist bottlenecks in the future from the technology point of view, we have the technological duty of many hydrogen portfolios, right, or PEM technologies. But we started 11, 12 years ago in kilowatts, and now we have megawatts with some development projects of more than 2 gigas. But we have our own perspective and great bets on the production of this technology. In fact, not so long ago, we produced half a giga per year, and in this year 2023 from Berlin, we will have a capacity of 1 giga. We'll add an additional giga per year, betting on the fact that the global market will respond, react, and accelerate based on our purpose. So we'll try to share what's happening from the technological point of view. But let's understand what's happening with our current demand. How is it divided? And what is the projected demand or the forecast of the demand? In 2021, we have an agreement of 91 million tons of hydrogen globally. This is the demand expected by 2050, which is accounted for in 62% of SMR paper. 26% accounts for, I don't see that much, it's 20 something, but gasification of coal. and 17% approx is byproducts from petrochemicals, and less than 1% accounts for water electrolysis, which is connected to renewable sources. If it's not connected to renewable sources, there's 2 or 3 more points and it can reach 4%. Now, that number, which is very small, it's very small, but in terms of installed capacity, it accounts for 5 gigas. But what happens with this? It has carbon footprints. Among the first two ones, one produces 10 kilos of CO2 per each kilo of hydrogen. The second one, 18 kilos of CO2 per kilo of hydrogen, account for 920 million tons of CO2 per year. And that 3% that's connected to the networks, they can even have more footprints than hydrogen produced by carbon gasification, because they can have up to 23 kilos of CO2 per each kilo produced of hydrogen produced, which would make us be in trouble, right? And that's the overview up to now. There's different projections and forecasts. Of course, we have our own beliefs too, related with different participations by 2050, the Paris Agreement, the net zero emissions to maintain under 1.5 degrees Celsius to the elevation of temperature. The bad news is that this Monday there's a report was published on climate change, right? And they said that we were at 1.1 and we should accelerate and emit 50% less by 2030. So it's in 7 years. That is an enormous challenge. That is why I'll focus on the word accelerate. There's different forecasts where we have, they account for 700 million tons, 7 or 8 times what we're currently producing at a global level, which in 2022 closed year-end at millions of tons. And with blue hydrogen share that is produced, at least at the current state of the art, between 1 or 4 kilos per each kilo of CO2 per each kilo of hydrogen, or fully via water electrolysis. We believe it'll be divided due to need more than desire. And that belief is reflected on the report that was published this year, the commodities report, where you see the share of natural gas in Latin America by 2050 accounting for 20%, and globally similar. Therefore, natural gas will be present. It is not so crazy to think that they're competitors. They can be complementary. It depends on the economy of each country. Whichever country has gas can create scale economy to produce blue hydrogen, and they're also contributing. We cannot have a bias now to think one over the other, just like technologically speaking. So this is the overview and the projection of, or the forecast, the demand forecast. So what about the forecast of technological development? The same year, 2021, we produced approximately 8 gigawatts of electrolyzers, mainly, well, many decades of development of the alkaline systems, right, which accounts for 82% and 16% PEM, which is a technology that we produce, and 2% accounts for others, with a forecast by medium term 2030 of 65 megawatts to be produced, where the share of alkalines lowers. Then we have a bit of PEM, and then solid oxides appear, and they could be an 8-9%. They could account for that. Short-term estimation by 2023, how much all technological companies have plans to increase their producing capacity, because we have the view that this will be necessary. That's why I was mentioning that the contribution that the role of hydrogen has to have in all economies, and the strategy of Chile, which was mentioned, it accounts for 24%, but it's at around 20%, generally speaking. Now, when we do these reports and projections, when you see that your own technology is quoted, we can see the quality of the report, and we have a dispersion of around 20%, 30% here. So that's why I'm saying that everything you see on screen has a percentage that's a bit different. Now, what's coming for the short term? mainly based on the two dominating technologies related with they're related with alkaline and AWE and with PEM. So we would like to create a mix of the advance of the demand, supply, and how does that link with the scenarios we must reach for it to comply and fulfill its role in the time it has to comply, right? And also regarding the purpose, which is to decarbonize, which is something environmental, and it's also linked with socioeconomic matters. So it's very hard to approach. I can't see these numbers. Maybe you can't see them either. Basically, the message here is that with the participation of the different technologies I mentioned, this is growing, right? In 2022, you see some data. There's an enormous leap here, and the bar is not enough here. The screen is not enough to show this bar, but it's whatever we reach to comply with this 800 million tons by 2050. It's truly around 5 terawatts of installed capacity. So in green here, we see the installed capacity, and this accounts for how projects have been developed, how they entered into operation with the different scales, right? We see some high points, some peaks, which I attribute to the quality of information, which that leap that we see interannually, because in fact, in reality, it's not the same. But we see that numbers turn red when we talk about forecasts or estimations. We had the estimation by 2030, and we had an estimated projection based on the demand projected by 2050, which would cover that, could serve that demand in terms of molecules that account for around 700 million tons per year, which are 4,500 gigawatts, 4.5 terawatts. On the right, we see the blue numbers, right? That's for the capacity of manufacturing, the electrolyzers manufactured. So, from the point of view of electrolyzers, it's 200 years, right? And the alkaline technologies have more than a century. So we, as part of the solution for decarbonization, we started on this again. So supply was always exceeded demand, but as we come close to scenarios and we need them to act in their role, that's where different situations start narrowing down. So if we comply with everything we said we didn't comply with in the Paris Agreement before, and we start fulfilling these, and we start to accelerate them, we will see some deficits to serve that demand, but not in general terms, but they could appear by a region. In our region, there's almost no capacity of integration or manufacturing or for manufacturing equipment, right? So our markets, we can see price, not only prices, because if we accelerate demand and we maintain the supply, it can accelerate not due to cost down, not due to material automation, but because of the market to increase the balance price. So that could affect us. That's why, from the supply point of view, we could have some bottlenecks for our region. That's in general terms. Let's land this to Latin America.
Hoy por hoy no movemos el
We are not moving the ampere meter, right? Supply and demand consumed in each one of the countries. The larger producer is Trinidad and Tobago with 1.8 million tons per year. Our capacity in the entire region is less than 5%, around 5-6%. That's a global demand. That's demand that's related with the 70 millions of 2019. Nevertheless, if we translate this into what it would entail to substitute this through water electrolysis, we're talking about 24 gigawatts in our region. So that's a number that, compared with the manufacturing capacity, starts to make a bit of noise. Now, we estimate that by 2030, there will be an increase of around 65% of our regional demand due to decarbonization, substitution, and in addition, due to new uses. Up to now, we've used this in refineries or competing with the world of ammonia, production of ammonia, of methanol, iron, steel, and other industries like the food industry, etc. And it has new uses: transports, e-fuels, dimethyl ether. In fact, or ether dimethyl, we've worked on this already, and that's also an alternative. Also, cement and new uses. That growth would account for 42% capacity to be installed, and those 42 gigas by 2030 in this projection accounts for 65% of what the projection said for the manufacturing capacity by 2030. Therefore, the model starts to shift a bit too, right? So, for Latin America, is it possible for there to be a potential bottleneck for LATAM? And it's a question that we will respond with time. And in Chile, green hydrogen has a role within the country's policies and the carbon neutrality strategy, which is basically divided in 50% adsorption. We don't speak much about adsorption, right? And there's not many forums or summits related on this. And reduction, 50%. And within that reduction, we can include the role of hydrogen, which accounts for 24%. We're situated here with and with tangibles. We have 1.25 megawatts installed in Punta Arenas with PEM technology. It's Silaser 200. It's a technology that we developed in 2015 and that we replaced in 2018 by Silaser 300. One produces 20 kilos and the other one 333 30 kilos per hour. So there's estimations. For example, Pricewaterhouse estimated that for by 2030 there will be a capacity of exporting from Chile hydrogen via some type of carrier, but also estimations by 2040, which are anticipating what is foreseen by 2050, because that has to do with an installed capacity of 12 to 24 gigawatts. Now, and the chart here appeared about the role of hydrogen within the Chile's carbon neutrality policy. That's produced, that translated into power, it's in 58,000 teracalories, which has transformed into capacity to produce hydrogen of 233 tons per hour, which are 12 gigas. So there are projections that do not balance out at the end. So it's an estimation that gives us an overview or a perspective, but maybe we have to see the off takers and the target market. Our conclusions for this are: from the economic point of view, we've reduced matters. We always say that technology has to reduce its prices for us to actually have business models. That is true because we can actually create projects, but we cannot extrapolate. In fact, we created more than 16 projects and we launched 2 projects this month, one in Sweden, the other one in Germany. We launched the project in Matagorda, Texas, of 1.2 gigas with His Global, right? Which we were technological partners with for generation in Magallanes. And from the economic point of view, the technologies have suffered in terms of R&D and automation, but their prices have also been impacted, just like prices have impacted everything, right? That has to do with what's happening geopolitically, what happens in a post-pandemic period. But prices are lower now, but it's very hard to keep them, to maintain them with time. There's a supply that we haven't mentioned. They have to do with acceleration. We have to be careful with acceleration because that can produce much demand, and the balance price cannot maybe respond to that demand in that timing that elevates prices. From the point of view of raw material, there's a mixed film here, right? There's some things that are in a downward trend. There are some things that are impacted in the supply chain. It's a seasonal effect, which has to do with the geopolitical and the post-pandemic period. We don't know how much that will last, but that also impacts costs. We also have the technology trends. What's coming for the next years has to do with alkaline water electrolysis. It has to, and PEM, right? Our first work or task has to do with modeling solutions. We have the timeout technologies. What we do is to model solutions where they can be co-owners, right? We can exert our own values, and the other one can absorb variability, right? So the same project, and according to the scale, they can coexist. So it's not one against the other, but we need to see how each one of the stakeholders play within the same project. Now we also have PEM, proton exchange membrane technologies, which are assuming maturity and performance, and with years. And in 2030, we have solid oxides that appear, and the exchange membrane electrolyzers, the AEMs. Everything is possible. We need to see how supply and demand balance out with this need of accelerating the product being left behind, right? We're left behind the commitments we assumed by 2015 that could generate new systems and maybe affect our region in terms of demand. Now, Latin America is a region that has much potential, but it's hard for it to go into concrete matters. That's historical, right? That is tangible. And an example of this, maybe with an example, there was a project where they presented the project, then they tried to see commercial scale, and the project changed from the south to the north, given the facilities or the. Sometimes we need to work together with the authorities. We need to demand. We need to make authorities see what this type of project or any type of industrial process actually entails. Undoubtedly, the three fundamental core aspects do not have to do with a technological point of view, but both regulation and governance, human capital, and the business environment and infrastructure. And to conclude, we see all these fields here, and it's the fine print of why things do not work out like they should. It'll be a challenge to scale this up from the infrastructure point of view of human capacity. It's not the same having a 100 megawatt project and a 2 gigawatt project. You need a human resource, you need closeness with neighboring communities from scratch, right? And we need all this to work intertwined in a well coordinated manner with purpose on our view, right? And I think we need to move faster. Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias, Marcelo, por explicar.
Thank you, Marcelo, for that review of our industry at the regional level in Chile, the bottlenecks, and the positivism to be able to accelerate this industry to comply with all the industries and our challenges ahead. We have 3 minutes for any question. We have a Q&A at this moment. Are there any doubts? Okay. Oh, there's a question right here. Please, you can help me with the microphone. Thank you. Good afternoon. Eduardo Toa from Colombia. I heard all the previous presentations based on green hydrogen from previous talks, and that which relates to mobility on carriers, for the blend of natural gas, the production of steel in the manufacturing plants, but I have not heard anything of a project related to the substitution of fossil fuels in the generation of energy. How far away are we to identify projects with this type of profile? Thank you very much. Thank you for the question. I wonder if I understand your question. There are projects that have to do with the substitution of fossil fuels via synthetic neutral carbon processes. The plant that was inaugurated here in Punta Arena on the 20th of December is a plant that through wind farms, it generates electricity, and with that renewable, we produce water electrolysis, green hydrogen with a pen style um, through synthesizers with CO2. They have Fischer-Tropsch system. They produce methanol and then gasoline. And then there is an octane that we use in our cars. So this is already present in this project, which currently has a scale of which is 130,000 liters of gasoline a year, has a commercial result, which started to roll, but then given a lack of understanding or with the perception that from the environmental standpoint, the rules were not very clear, they decided, the developers, both in Power and Heath Global, decided to go to the power plant, which feeds the commercial plant of, and this is right now on hold, with the objective to reinitiate the process. Now, the commercial, much larger leap is in the United States, where in Texas, we signed an agreement, which is public, of 1.8 giga to generate synthetic gasoline. It's not a panacea, but certainly is much more realistic than when we talk about saying we're going to electrify all the automotive industry. We're not calculating things very clearly. At a global level is 1,000 400 million cars. If you think about what was produced on a yearly level last year, lightweight 70 million, about 80 million, out of which 3.5 million of those were electrical, and you divide the amount, those numbers is about 20 years to substitute the entire park and about 400 years for the other. It's not realistic. Gasoline, synthetic gasolines per se, I insist it's not the panacea, but it helps to not add emissions to the environment, because certainly these are done through CO2. Thank you. Thank you, Marcelo. We will continue with our next panelist. If there are any more questions for Marcelo, please keep them for the panel, which will take place in a few minutes. So, our next guest for today is Judith Agüero, who's the Director of Energy Development and New Business. He's a civil engineer with international renowned experience in various companies, in carbonization, and various other energies. He's going to talk about enabling infrastructure and other derivatives in Chile. With a hand, let us welcome Judith Agüero. Good afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I hope that I am at the comply with your expectations. I'm going to talk to you about ENAP and ENAP's experience. The development of green hydrogen derived in the area of Magallanes. I am normally in Punta Arenas supporting this activity, and what it is meaning or what it is signifying as far as habilitating the infrastructure or making the infrastructure implemented. ENAP in the year 2019, it signed its first agreement for green hydrogen. Our idea was simply to help to see what could happen. And slowly we realized that this industry had a huge potential, great dynamics within Magallanes, and ENAP was a very relevant player, logistically speaking, and we began working more intensively with these different projects, and took me in particular in June of 2020 to move to Punta Arenas, which is where I currently live now for 2 years. So for us, the interaction with projects is based on seeking synergies to do a joint work so that the development and concept of each one of these projects can interact with our existing infrastructure, and from then on to be able to achieve various things. One, optimize investments, associated investments, which is what we're seeking, as was mentioned by the roadmap of green energy presented by the Ministry of Energy by 2030. And one of them is $1 per kilogram of hydrogen production. So optimizing investments would allow us to reach that objective. Now, on the other hand, to use existing infrastructure today, maritime infrastructure would allow projects to reduce their deadlines and their terms to be able to reach their customers. A creation of a new port in this area would be 5 to 6 years. Using and optimizing and reconfiguring what we have in place now would reduce the terms and would allow us to have a product in the market as soon as possible, understanding that on the roadmap, as I was saying, there is a 2030 race and who arrives better positioned, and our country seeks to have a relevant world role. Now, as far as ENAP is concerned, the dynamic background of this has to do with active values, where we had dead times, let's say, and to be able to utilize those spaces to enter this new industry and define our positioning, both in terms of infrastructure, availability, and the future of products that we have has to migrate in time. Will have to go hand in hand, as was said in the previous presentations, responding to industrial objectives in the reduction of CO2. So what we have carried out is that there is a relevant role of this region to integrate different developments. Why did we want to integrate them? If possible, it would allow us to reduce community future impacts in the region of Magallanes. The most important and relevant topic and of greatest concern is the environmental impact this kind of development is going to produce in an area that, as many of you, and all of us, or many of us know, is very well known given its tourism and the enormous amount of nature in the region. So where we saw we could interact, or we would have availability of infrastructure, and we have an advantage. And we want to keep that advantage in time and support the different developments. So what do we expect to achieve, and what do we think we are trying to achieve with time, not only in solitary but jointly, to earn experience with future opportunities? This value chain of each one of these products, there's an implementation of technology which allows us to learn and participate in these projects when they're operational, earning experience, improve our knowledge in processes. In the case of ammonia, most of the projects today in Magallanes is based on ammonia. There's a great deal to discuss, to integrate, and how do we develop the infrastructure in order to make it into an energy vector, which of course is ammonia. As an app, we want to access new income, new business through this new industry, and to have certain participation both in equity and offtake of these products in a portfolio change or complementary to our future portfolio. As an institution and company, we want to prepare the company for energy transformation and position ourselves in this market. Now, as we stated previously, as the main role and an important role player in the industry, we are working actively to seek integration of projects around our infrastructure and integration based on important aspects which refers to storage and land transportation of these products. What we don't want, and no single project seeks that, is to have one port per one duct per product and a great deal of storage infrastructure throughout the region. And what we will try is to try to design hubs where we can have this kind of enabling infrastructure, um, port-based, and what we can do in the future. Now, this is a very simple image. On the dots in yellow, Puerto Sara and so on, and Percy and Clarencia, we have infrastructure which would respond to this industry, and we will work jointly with the projects. And the green circles are massive projects, if you will. It has electrolyzers, sizes. We can see that, for example, in San Gregorio, there's a high concentration of projects. Today, I would say that at least 5 of them. And to the left, you can see Laguna Blanca. There's a occurrence of new projects. And then towards the Bahia of Posesión, and in the island of Tierra del Fuego, there's about 3 or 4 projects that will have a relevant interaction in Bahia Gente Grande. To be able to develop this work, we have signed collaboration and confidentiality agreements with more than 15,000 kilowatts with different equivalents. There are projects that we're working with, I would say 80% of the developers in the region. So it gives us a good general and broad view of what's taking place. And beyond that, we can relate to these projects and have an integrative role, not only to interact with the authorities, of course, with the territorial plans and the developments that need to take place in the region, but also reduce environmental impact and a closer relationship with the communities. An example, maybe I'm going too fast, an example of what we're doing or we expect to do. For example, today, one of the critical areas in the region is providing equipment for the generators and machinery, industrial machinery for these projects, the entrance of these products. So what we're doing in one of our facilities, which is Espigón de Laredo, which is about 20 kilometers north of Punta Arenas, it is part of an industrial complex where we have all the different Cabo Negro location and the production of methanol, or methane, sorry. What we're doing is reconfiguring this point in order to provide the input location for the industrial entrance of machinery for the first stages. One of the things we're doing here in the first stage is have an area of 15 hectares, which would allow for logistical ocean land strategy, which would be like a logistic uh, lung for this area, would provide delicate or hazardous material areas. We have services, electricity, water, gas. It is an active industrial area. So we're not impacting new zones for environmental aspects in the region. We're utilizing something that is already in place. And this area, as you can see, it has a direct link to Route 9. It is a pier or breakwater area. It is about 20 kilometers, so the impact should be much lower than having a new logistics in the northern area of Punta Arenas. We're working here with 3 developers so that we can find a solution that will allow the entrance of equipment and incorporate in the research an alternative and solution that is in place today and will facilitate the environmental approval conditions for this stage. Now, in terms of challenges to arrive, to be on time in that which relates to this development, there's a great deal of development, but we have to be on time. As has been stated, we have to start discussing and we have to start doing. Certainly, what we believe is important is to work in reducing impact. And if we estimate this and we think about all the territorial plans that need to be developed in the region and the progress that some of these projects already have, we have a 2-year gap, 1.5 to 2 years. If everything goes as expected, the projects will begin their construction and will still have 2 years for these territorial plans to be in their optimum stage. On the other hand, we need to understand each other's needs, both the authorities and the projects. We already talked about the Farol Sur. They're both right, or none of them were right. There, we needed to understand and reach agreement so that they could facilitate development, because we understand that this development is positive for the region, but we have to understand the environmental impact that this will generate in general, and it will be translated into various areas and variables that we are going to have to discuss for the region. Now, on the other hand, we have to carry out or develop the logistic definitions. We don't only need to talk about ports here. We need to review transportation that's done of the product within the region. I insist, we're going to be transporting ammonia in large volumes, in large quantities. If that's the solution, we have alternative solutions. We need to store this somewhere. And what we hope that the storage will be designed in the form of a hub where we have tank concentrations, where we will not have tanks, particularly on the coast of the island. And what we seek, and we understand that we're doing hand in hand with the developer, with the authorities and developers, to work the Corfo Transforma program, where all the different agents are participating. Everyone that has a voice here in a very fluid, very close relationship with the regional authorities. We're analyzing different topics, and with each one of the regional authorities, we have open discussions, and we are trying to come closer to finding a coordination and collaboration to make these projects a reality with reasonable impacts from the standpoint of everyone, considering the dimension of this new industry that will be installed in the region. That's the extent of my talk. I don't know, maybe I went too fast. Thank you very much. You're right on time, Judith. That was very interesting to see how throughout the day with different panels we have heard that the main structure for the development of the industry, of green industry, is the demand infrastructure and the enabling infrastructure. The how enable infrastructure with a strategy in the middle and long term and diversification, we can make it more competitive vis-a-vis other potential projects. We have 5 minutes for questions, if there are any questions from the public. Hello. Thank you for your presentation. It was very good. Congratulations. Without a doubt, you have a major asset, which are the ports in Magallanes. And you, as an app, you have to make a decision. You could eventually say, well, I have the port and I sell port services with so many dollars for transferred ammonia. Alternative two, you can say, I could do a joint venture with companies that want to invest in the future developments in the ports. Or third alternative, you could say exactly as Codelco has said very well in Mejillone, what they have said, I offer a BOT, I have the port, I provide you with a port, somebody will manage it for the next 30 years, for example. Have you assessed those three business models that you could develop towards the future? Yes. Up to last year, we were in different conversations to understand how we could support and how could we accelerate all this process. And the objective this year is exactly what you mentioned, to find concrete or make concrete decisions. Projects sometimes don't require too much. We are pressured. This year we have said, okay, let's return the pressure. And what we're doing right now in each one of these polls that I was showing where an app has infrastructure is seek solutions or provide solutions that will allow for the reconfiguration and in a joint conversation with the developers, their needs, their requirements, and their current current and future requirements in the three business models that you mentioned and a few more. But I believe that there is no unique definition for each one of the zones because each one of them has their specificities. If you ask me in area 2, which is the easiest, I could say that there's a very close scheme of what the reclassification of Quinteros was. We have an area that has a pier that has a value. We need to reconfigure it. We need to supply, yes, a unloading developed by the developers. We need to add the capex to the pier, and we're going to do that through a business model that will support what we have. The third parties will provide what they need, and we will see how we define the operationals process, which will probably be the simplest. We have the three alternatives that are on the table and a few more too, and it will depend on each zone how we resolve it. As I said, we already have the pier. As I said, in the case of Gregorio, it's a little bit more complex because we have to seek information in areas where we have to implement a great deal of investment. We're going to see on a stage by stage basis. This year is to have a business model and seek who is going to be with us in this development.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions here? Let's start. Hello, Yudis. Good afternoon. I have a question regarding what you mentioned, the gap of 1 or 2 years, right? For the projects that are ready for construction versus the incorporation of the regional development plan. What does that gap mean? What is the bottleneck doing for those things not to go together with time? It's just a personal estimation. It's personal opinion. We must just share in different times, right? What we're seeing now is that we've activated most of the regional plans, and every one of the authorities, everyone is working on what it's corresponding, right? We have to understand what is happening to develop the plan. It's an important part, and that's what we've been doing. Last year, we worked with Corfo in the Transforma program, trying to conduct full level diagnosis, because, as we mentioned, this not only impacts a port, but in a radio program, they were asking me what was going to happen with the quality of Wi-Fi in the region once the projects were there, and yeah, it could happen that it ends up impacting. But conducting that diagnosis took us a year, and projects continued. They continued their processes. So what we're estimating is that possibly 2 or 3 projects have their own measures, and that starting the fourth one, we have a team that's more coordinated, more organized, and that it generates less headaches to everyone, so we can continue advancing. But we're working on that. We're working for that to happen. Hello, thank you very much for the presentation. One last question. Do you have in your portfolio any refinery, Talcahuano, Concon, any projects associated to hydrogen for refineries? Are you talking about green hydrogen? Yes. We currently produce hydrogen in refineries based on the CMR process with natural gas. And what we're doing is we're assessing projects, for example, to go to blue hydrogen, which would be a first alternative that is relatively competitive. In the economic assessment and the current supply of hydrogen in refineries, let's remember that we are the consumers of almost 95% of the hydrogen in the country, from gray hydrogen to green hydrogen. That has a significant impact in the company, which we currently believe does not make much sense to assume. And on the other hand side, we have long-term contracts with hydrogen with a vendor that we must respect and comply with. So we're assessing transitions, for example, transferring from gray to blue hydrogen, and to the extent possible, we are going to see development of pilots, not only hydrogen, but and products. And we're seeing some options of going the current, moving from kerosene to SAF and to some biodiesel products. So not only are we concentrating in hydrogen, but in truly assessing our array of products and to see how we can make them progress towards less decarbonization. Last but not least, from here, from for us to say that our products have less carbon, right, by 2030 than one we could have. Okay, thank you very much. I will ask you to save your additional questions for the final panel. And I'll now introduce our third panel member and our final one. As commented before, he cannot be present with us due to COVID, but the connection is ready. Our third panel member is Cristian Reyes. He's a civil engineer, electrician from Universidad de Chile. He has postgraduate studies in administration and development of businesses from University of Milan, and green hydrogen from University Federico Santa Maria. 11 areas of experience in development of engineering and construction in non-conventional renewable energies, participating in constructions, operation, development of large-scale projects in energy different in Colombia and Argentina, Peru, Chile, and different energy markets. He's currently the manager of development of hydrogen and for Latin America and IS Andes. He will speak about an example of green hydrogen projects here in Chile. Christian, can you hear us? Perfect. Can you hear me? Yes. The floor is yours. Thank you very much for having me. On behalf of IS Andes, it is my pleasure to be here with you. The idea of my presentation today is to show what the company is currently doing across the region and the world, and to focus in a project in Chile and the project in the US. We communicated this a couple months ago. So, without no further ado, can you see my presentation on screen? Could you confirm if you see the presentation? Yes. Okay, I imagine you can. I'd like to tell you a bit about AES. It is a global company that has its headquarters in the US and Virginia. It was created in 1981. It has a presence in 14 different countries and 4 continents with more than 2.6 million utility customers. To a large, in general terms, it's a company that has more than 30 gigawatts of power in operation. To date, we manage a project portfolio of 8 gigawatts with projects that are already under construction phase in renewables. They're renewables, or they have power purchase agreements that are signed. We're around 8,500 people across the globe, and we're well known for our commitment in sustainability. Hydrogen projects for us are truly important in the decarbonization process, and likewise in our growth plans due to different reasons. We have many renewable, non-conventional renewable energy projects under construction and operation in these countries. We're leaders in building and operating these projects. We have strong leadership in the storage of energy. We've created a company that's called Fluence. That's a partnership between us and Siemens. That we're doing this correctly, and we have many battery energy storage systems based on lithium systems.
Proceso de desalinización de agua.
We also have saltwater desalination experience. We have projects in Mejillones where we have different pipelines, desalination plants that are currently under operation and been built. And we have them within the company, and we have presence in places that are key for hydrogen production. And we have a match then between energy storage, NCREs, and saltwater desalination processes, and that lets us cover much of the value chain of hydrogen production. That is why we're taking this as a significant element in our growth plans. Within the assets that IS has globally, we're present in the international business unit in the most competitive countries for producing hydrogen in the future, according to the international renewable energy projections, right? Chile, Colombia, Mexico, and Brazil are mainly seen as countries where the most competitive hydrogen will be produced from 2040 onwards, approx. If you look at the chart here, the comparison, when we're in the phase of potential competitors like China, Australia, Saudi Arabia, etc., it's prices that are more or less similar. And compared with countries that we now see as potential consumers and customers, like the European Union, Japan, Korea, the price of producing hydrogen in those countries versus the countries where AES is located, it's different. And you may see this in the example. The production of hydrogen in Korea versus the production of hydrogen in Chile, in terms of cost per kilogram, should differ at around 70%. What are we doing in these countries? We are creating pipelines. We're working on project portfolios. The idea is to have at least one project per country, and two or three, a couple of them, to maximize the probability and minimize risks. Projects have a giga scale mainly because what we look for is scale economies for the product to be competitive, for it to have to have a price of sales that's accessible to the end consumer, and we're aiming for projects that can operate by 2030. We put this date because we've seen that to date, and from here onwards, there's going to be a series of regulatory adjustments for these programs to be constructed. There's going to be a growth in demand. There's going to be improvement on technology for the consumption systems to be able to adopt the use of hydrogen at a medium term within the global map that was mentioned. The main producers, you can see them on screen, right? Chile, Brazil, Colombia, and the US with the main consumers. In this case, it could be the European community, right? Korea and Japan. And here we have the map with the projects that we have in AES now. We are working on gigascale project in the US. We have an initiative which I'll tell you about later. There's an initiative that will also manage of more than 1 gigawatt of renewable power in Colombia, the same in Brazil, in the state of Ceará, and the north of Chile in the region of Antofagasta. All these projects, their aim is to have non-conventional renewable energies, mainly wind power, solar power, battery storage system for energy management, and hydrogen production through electrolysis. Here we have a map of what we see as products of these projects, basically through renewable energy and the desalinated production of salt water. When we combine them in the electrolysis process, we can produce hydrogen to later transport it either through pipelines, ships, or trucks, and aim for aviation and mining and heavy-duty trucks sector, which could be local consumption in the same areas where these projects are located, or another vision we have is to have this gas-based hydrogen, which could be combined with nitrogen obtained through air separation units and through hard wash process, generate green ammonia, which can be transported, and through a decracking process, we can come back to hydrogen to satisfy needs of the steel industry, refineries, etc. Or it could be used as green ammonia directly as a fuel system, either for ships, for large ships or vessels, and large consumption. So, in simple words, we're saying that hydrogen, for AES, hydrogen can have two types of deliverables, either hydrogen itself or green ammonia. How do we seek to achieve these goals, long-term goals we have? To operate at least 1 gigascale project by 2030 through a strategic approach. What we seek is to have partnerships and off-taking. First of all, off-taking, it's because these large-scale projects mean that we must have investment levels of $1 billion. We're talking about $3 or $4 billion at least. And to ensure we have that capex investment, what we want is to obtain an off-taker that, one or many off-takers that are able to capture total production purchase, or most of the total production. And in second place, we hope we can have equity partnerships to invest in this business, partners that have enough financial support to invest billions of dollars. And in second place, partners that have some type of knowledge on hydrogen storage, treatment of hydrogen, right, distribution of it, for them to complement to to us knowledge regarding NCREs, batteries, and saltwater desalination processes, and to reduce the credit-worthy or the credit issues we have for this investment, right? This slide is a summary of the projects we have. The project we have in Antofagasta. Some of you know this. This slide was published in March 2021, and it establishes AES's initiative, which is a project in Antofagasta, was an investment of $1.5 billion to initiate operations by 2025. A green ammonia project that sought through a partnership with a company that at the time was unknown of. They sought to have a project that had an installed capacity of around 800 megawatts of renewable energy to produce around 250 annual tons of green ammonia for exporting abroad. That project is now one of the pillars of our company, and the initiatives that we have in Chile, the plus 1 gigawatt project that we were mentioning before in Chile, clearly many of its characteristics have changed. And what are we currently doing? Our installed capacity we currently have is more than a gigawatt, and it's at around 1.5 gigawatts. We have already hired the engineering company who's making all the work, doing all the necessary works to create the EIA, environmental impact assessment. We have a project, it's quite an extensive project that has a large impact. That's why we're thinking about, we're studying community relationships, right? We're on site activating the shared value plans for the project to be able to add value to the place and not only have a negative impact on it. It's important for it to have a positive balance. That is why we've been working for more than 1 year with the different stakeholders neighboring to the project. They're complex, large projects that have times of construction of around 5 years, that have an environmental footprint that's large. They have extensions, thousands of hectares. That is why early work with neighboring communities and the different stakeholders is very important, which is something that we've been doing for some time now, as I said. And there's certain regulatory barriers that we're also trying to solve. Driving for this to happen, it's issues with territorial compatibility, with the need of the project of extracting energy from the grid. It's a project that's connected to the grid, and it's a self-consumption system that is enormous, and it has a production capacity of more than 1 giga and a consumption capacity of more than 1 giga. And the idea is that what is the surplus can be injected into the network, and when the project needs energy from the grid, it can take it from there too. So that's why we're negotiating the interconnection permits and everything that will let us have a rate to build condition close to 2025 to make an investment decision and to be able to put the first kilogram of hydrogen launch it into the market before 2030, by 2030. And that was regarding the project in Chile, but I'd like to tell you about a case that's a bit more advanced that we have as a company. Is a U.S. project that is called Felix. Project Felix, it's a company, it's a partnership with Air Products, a leading company in generation, transmission, distribution of hydrogen. This is a project that extends the leadership of AES in the sector. We've formally communicated this, and it's an investment of $4 billion. It's a project strictly of green hydrogen to produce more than 200 daily tons of this product, and to supply the national market. These are the numbers. In installed capacity, this project in Texas has 1.5 gigawatts of renewable nominal power, only solar, wind and solar, as it wants to initiate commercial operation in 2027 and then 20 commercial in 2024. The partnership, AS invests 50% of the capital in our products, the other 50% of equity. And as I mentioned before, what it seeks is to supply the local industry and transport systems. It's a project that is so large that it avoids 50 million tons of carbon dioxide throughout its entire life cycle. We have global and local benefits, mainly the different construction jobs. These facilities need on-site staff. It's not like NCREs, which are automated and they minimize working on site, but we permanently need here hundreds of workers on site, permanent staff, and workers that transport the end product from the production site to the consumption site. And we're talking about thousands of jobs here. It also supplies a safe, environmentally friendly green hydrogen product, and it drives the economics, the region's economic growth. It's important for this to be aligned with the objectives of the Energy Department, of the U.S. Energy Department, and when it operates, it will not exceed the regulations, the safety regulations of Texas, right? In terms of emissions, it does not emit pollutants. It does not have sulfur or nitrogen oxide or carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide emissions. It's very clean project. In terms of water consumption, we've sought for these cooling systems not to consider the system with water, but you consume much less water, air, and the 90% of the cooling systems of the project are based on air cooling and not water cooling. And all the wastewater, the treatment of water will not contain any extra elements that was not already in water. We're not adding toxicity to environment. In terms of safety, this is a technology that is approved. I've heard much that there's certain reluctance to the use of hydrogen, a bit of fear. This company, our product, works since 1960 in the US. It has agreements with NASA. These cryogenic trucks that are used and the containers that are used for transport of hydrogen and storage of it for more than they were being used in the U.S. for more than 40 years. They have 4 tons for transport. They can use on-site storage. It's technology that's proven already, and through a partner that has been working for more than 80 years on these topics. And that is my presentation. I don't know if you have any questions or comments.
Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Christian, for your presentation and explanation. I'm not sure if you have any questions for Christian. We will accept, given the time constraints, we will take one question. Thank you, Christian. Good afternoon. Felipe from Cibo Energía. I wanted to ask you, we saw the projects that you have in the United States. You have assets, generation assets there. If this new U.S. government subsidy has changed a little bit in that which relates to competitiveness or the decisions for investment in Latin America from the standpoint of the U.S. Thank you for the question. Yes, if I understand your question correctly, it is geared towards whether we're going to lose protagonism given these subsidies. I believe the response is no. On the contrary, this kind of project, what it seeks to do from our standpoint is to boost green energy with a large subsidy. We saw projects in Chile and the United States, and from the moment the subsidy appeared, it triggered our intention not only to develop projects there, but build and operate. To build it in 2024 and operate it in 27 means that you're going to have 1 gigawatt of electrolysis by 2027, and that implies that the entire supply chain associated to the electrolyzer that is present today, it is the most expensive part of the hydrogen. By gaining a scale economies and scaling, it means our products will be able to have positive synergies. It doesn't only occur in the United States, in Neon. It's a project that is larger, that generates 650,000 hydrogen tons of hydrogen, not 200 like the one in the United States, but more than triple. That project at the outset in 2026 will also allow us the industry of hydrolysis, manufacturing, and production of technology will grow in scale, and that in the future is going to be good for Chile, South America, and the rest of the world. Thank you, Christian. Thank you. Thank you for your answer, Christian. I would like to invite our panelists, please, to come up for the session. We're going to have a bit of a conversation here. Marcelo, Judith, Christian, if you have any problems with the connection, please let us know. Yes, thank you. I can hear you. Well, what a great honor to share with you and streaming with Christian. It has been a learning curve, wonderful learning curve. And the development of this industry doesn't necessarily have as an engine the economy, but it's rather an environmental motivation to comply with world objectives, decarbonization by 2050, neutral carbonization, and also resilience, which is what this country has in agreement with the Paris Agreement. However, this accelerated need of decarbonization vis-a-vis the climate change that affects us all, but there are a few countries that react to this. But this reaction capacity versus the demand that's available, it's not necessarily in line. So what is the analysis? This goes to Marcelo. And what would we require to face this alignment with the offer and demand vis-a-vis what we are undergoing in the climate change? Thank you very much for the question, Carolina. It's difficult to give you a concrete answer because it responds to a dynamic process. The market per se is at the birthing level. It's beyond an embryo. We have a learning curve, which implies, although there are certain gaps as far as expectations, and that's what the dilemma of the egg and the chicken. What's first? Is it the demand that tracks or drives the demand, or is it the demand that drives offer based on concepts, offers, and visualizing the purpose and what it means to carry out the purpose? The presentation, we mentioned, of course, the CODs that are still in under operations, and the CODs don't have to do with development and the timings in real time, which is what technologies require, not only through electrolyzers, but also through other technologies that are added to value chains. So I would say, to summarize, today we have a concrete need. Consistently in the number 6 IPCC that was published on Monday, there's a new pay attention. We're not complying, we're delayed, and that delay could be accelerated, and that acceleration could generate a different ecosystem that we're going to continue traveling on. So I have a reaction, how we're going to do it and what path are we going to take it. But we do have the conviction that we're going to make every effort possible that our customers and, of course, all the markets in which we operate, they understand fully how we should do it from our standpoint. and go with them hand in hand, accompany them. Thank you, Marcelo. Very interesting. In this country, from whether we're advanced or not, there are certain details so that the industry could develop as a fundamental pillar. And this is where the next question goes that I would like to ask Judith. From the standpoint of a company that already has transportation, storage, implementation of infrastructure, how do you see the challenge on behalf of the governance of regulatory and the role of the state when looking at the role that you're going to be looking at the different products, the expansion of the infrastructure, the need for investment? Does it come on the side of subsidies? Do you have incentives? How do you analyze the role of the government here? We see this as, from the standpoint of the government, the 2021 climate change law, and some definitions were set forth, and there were requirements already implemented or definitions set forth for the energy industry. And with our own strategic plan, it gives us a roadmap that we are designing to establish clear milestones to go from today to tomorrow. And the profound question is, how do we reach the tomorrow? And what characteristics do they have? Today, the most important role that's defined is 2050, so that Chile will become carbon neutral. As you were saying, 50% of that carbon neutrality comes from absorption, and the other percentage has to be provided by the industrial between 18 and 25. It will vary, the figure. So based on that, we see that the portfolio has to change, and it's no longer, I would say, defined by a law defined by the government, but rather from the market. The investment banking industry already asks you, what are you doing? What are your plans? What are your milestones? The investment banking is already asking us, where is our scope 3? Because some years ago, nobody would ask you that. It was unthought of. The insurance companies ask the same. Insurance companies say, well, as of this moment, we're going to classify our portfolio between higher or lower risk in the environmental context, and that is essential. I believe that there are various action paths that encourage companies, particularly ours, because it is a refining company, drilling of fossil fuels, to begin understanding what is the roadmap that will comply with our role to 2050 as a first alternative, and see what else we can do, but always thinking of the company's viability. And there's a very important and relevant aspect. We cannot begin carrying out all sorts of activities associated to products that are not competitive today, and the market does not take it as a substitute unless there are subsidies related, which we do not have. Last year, through Corfo, there was a call for tender, but from that standpoint, we hope that this will increase. The country has enormous needs, and one of them is this one. And what we believe is that we responsibly, what we have to do is take as a light, how do we participate in that milestone, and how do we generate a roadmap with very clear milestones that everyone is asking us for, not only the government. Thank you very much. In fact, considering this light that you were referring to, there are major areas, there are stakeholders that are a beacon to this. All the needs that Chile has, there's a response to a question I have for Christian. The easy answer, or the question might be easy, but the answer might be more complex. But mentioning the Felix United States project that you have, why did you decide to carry out that project in the United States and not in Chile? Basically, that is the question. Thank you for the question. I would say mainly because of the economic impact that uh, the benefits that the government of the United States launched. They're very important. We're talking about, depends really on the contamination that hydrogen can bring. If it's green, we're talking about subsidies of $3 per kilogram, and 30% of the useful life of the project. If we're talking about 30-year operations, that's the economic difference. We have to recall that we seek these projects to be sustainable. We want to comply with all the agreements and the mission we have as society to decarbonize the planet. But if we don't have regulations that force you to buy the green product or somehow flatten the playing field, or that could apply taxes to contaminant elements, you have to compete with prices. And hydrogen is trying to replace diesel or other type of fuel, and the price is complex. It's difficult to challenge, and the difference is significant. But mainly, the green hydrogen through electrolysis is new. The hydrogen production at the global level, it's much lower than 5%, is done by electrolysis. All the other methods are contaminant methods. The projects of electrolysis are low in the world. We are an incipient market. Therefore, equipment projects today, or prices today, are not what the future will bring if we have a market. But having said this, is that the subsidy system of the United States allowed hydrogen to compete with its diesel alternatives. And this is why you have guaranteed that what you're going to produce is going to be able to be sold. And that is a major difference. And that's what we do not see in Chile. But that doesn't mean that in the future we will not see it. We know that in the electrolyzer prices will go down. We hope that the market will adopt more hydrogen, whether abroad or locally. And locally, we want to develop projects that will allow us to be in a position to continue investing to 2025. The United States is right now going through the subsidies, and South America is going to be at that stage in 2025, to summarize. It is an economic decision. The costs of equipment you refer to, and this question goes to Marcelo. Do you believe that the cost of the equipment that are required for this industry is going down as the market expects, or not? Well, they are dropping in a sustained process or line. I had to evaluate various projects for the region for 3 or 4 years now, about $1,000 per kilowatts. And we had to explain what those $1,000 per kilowatts meant in this case. And this is where we had electrolyzers versus electrolyzing systems. We had gas plants, and depending on where you're going, you have to understand what that cost includes. Today, for projects, we're talking about $640 a kilowatt, and that means that there is a substantial drop. but the focus or analysis of these projects has to be cost leveled and not capex, because certain technologies are capex, they have advantages in capex, but end up in opex and vice versa. And what we have to understand, if the target market, if we have more than 16 projects between Australia, Saudi Arabia, Austria, Germany, Sweden, the United States, in each market, there's an ecosystem. So to talk about technology costs, we have to see under what conditions, what is the volume, and what is the term for this, and within what ecosystem. Because when we look at the leveling cost, if it's can be extrapolated, but if it's in the market based on the ecosystem they're going to serve, it has to be a more holistic viewpoint, a more complex, because it's worth carrying out these exercises to find out where we should be and what should we have. There's without a doubt countries that can subsidize, offer demand. They have taken initiatives to activate this. We are in an embryo stage and it's difficult to move because we have uncertainties on the demand and we have certain uncertainties in the offer. So there are alternatives in replacing something new where the production cost, I insist, is based on 67 or 68% of the cost of energy, and we don't know how to drop that cost and the consumption, and not in a cheap and then systemic cost go 14 or $16 per megawatt hour. So 1 to 3% of the cost of water is the most expensive water. It is not above 3%. And the capex of the electrolyzer within a system is 40%, and within the leveled system is 25%. So we're focusing ourselves on something that we have been working on, but it is we have to identify good projects that have long-term projects that make economic sense with the objective that we're seeking for the market, and what is optimum at each one of these variables that make economic sense. I wouldn't go so much to the capex of the electrolyzer because there are other equipment in the value chain of a gas plant, compressors, and other types of equipment that do not have a cost down reaction, but they do also make the capex in these applications. Thank you. Taking into account the objective, the market, this question is for you, Judith. In the prioritization, strategic from the strategic standpoint, we have to look at the local consumption, or are we talking about exports? And if we're talking about exports, we're talking as a country, as Chile, or we're talking about as a region? From our standpoint in ENAP, we have a strategic supply for the country. So understanding that we are in the infrastructure more than in the product itself, what we observe, or we seek at least, is synergies in offtake in projects that can support us in the strategic supply of the country with energy resources or energy products, if you will. We know that we can associate ourselves with HIF because they produce synthetic fuel, and we're waiting to see competitive prices to be a real substitute for our gasoline or fuel, because in the future it's not going to replace it totally. But as ENAP, we observe this from the national domestic strategy as a supply, because it is our strategic role as a company. But from the Magallanes region, the vision is very clear. It is export, basically. Why? Because in the region we don't have major consumption, we don't have an industrial area that is significant. So all these developments derive from a high wind power potential which is hydrogen and also the cost of energy in the line of costs, will allow you to reach a competitive value from here to 2030. So I think that the vision today of the region is to export. And within that vision, we want to make those projects viable with the support of infrastructure, but also seeking our position to comply with our strategic role within the country.
Thank you very much. And under the framework of joining efforts, even in terms of cost of infrastructure, we'd seen in your presentation, Christian, that you spoke about the differentiation and competitiveness. We could have only referred to the export of green hydrogen, the Latin American region, and versus other countries, and the cost. What do you think this is due to? What are the calculation factors that lead you to say, okay, green hydrogen that you can produce and generate in Latin America can be much more competitive than other regions, other countries? Thank you for that question. There's two key elements. First of all, the level of renewable resources we have in the region. In Chile, for example, we have winds in the Patagonia, which are 13 annual average of 13 meters per second, or something that lets you have a factor of the wind power plant of 62%, and where you have capex associated to that type of project, that's much lower than that. Thinking about putting the turbines in hills, so with a low capex and good renewable resources, this will allow you to generate energy at a low cost. And as our friends previously mentioned, that is an important part of the final price for the production of hydrogen, levelized cost of origin. We in Chile have the best solar radiation in the world that lets you have a central power plant factor that is very high, and with flat land with low construction costs, with a market that's already existing, that's quite mature in Chile, which thus lets you generate electricity at very low cost, therefore having a very low cost of hydrogen in the future. And that is repeated in Colombia and the La Guajira sector, where wind power is similar to Patagonia. It's not, they're not to the same extent, but they're similar. We're at around 60%. We're not at 60%, but 55, 58% factor for the plant, same characteristics. And in north part of Brazil, our position will let us access wind speed that is similar, which lets you lower the hydrogen generation OPEX values. In second place, the Chile's a robust and solid country compared with competitors, having a low weighted average cost of capital, or a medium cost of capital lets you demand profit that is not that high and have competitive prices, right? The profitability, sorry. That happens to the same extent in Brazil, and but they don't have overflow. And having this low risk geopolitical framework and good resources let you generate or create the product at a very low price versus the competition. Thank you very much for your answer, Christian. We do not have many minutes left, but we will now then conclude this panel. We see that, or do we have questions? I was going to say that we are very pleased that we had many attendees here by the end of the day, so that shows your great interest in all the conferences and panels. And we'll now open some space for questions. Thank you. Christian, just a question. We've seen competitiveness of Chile, but it's also a relevant point in the development of projects. A relevant point is the times needed for environmental impact assessment, environmental permits, sectorial permits. you that you're located in 4 different countries with projects of similar scale over 1 giga and then 1.5 here in Antofagasta. In times of permits, is Chile truly competitive, and what's the difference with other countries? And the second question is, when you see the studies of the international agencies, you always have levelized costs, but there's other factors that affect the final price of hydrogen. For example, it could be income tax. And if you see countries like Saudi Arabia, which has almost no income tax, of course, the price of hydrogen becomes very competitive compared with Chile, that has a 27%. So from that point of view, what is your analysis regarding the competitiveness of Chilean permits versus other countries, and also in tax? In terms of permits, I believe that we're making country efforts to be a bit more eco-friendly. If we compare with other countries like Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, and others, I'd say that this system is more robust. It is aiming to safeguard the environment and communities, which means efforts for private parties, which we're currently following as AES, as a company. We're trying to comply with all the requirements with certain guidelines and criteria that are, despite the fact that they're not part of a regulation, they end up being demands when they're environmentally assessed through the relevant organisms. We've seen that Brazil and Colombia are a bit more delayed, and on the other hand, given this competitiveness, Chile, our projects in the other regions, they have a bit more of delay if we compare with Chile. So I can comment that we see significant effort in maritime environmental guidelines. There's been new guidelines published that recommend measuring 2 years on a row, and we had 13 criteria published from August last year until January this year, which somehow demand to measure with more time and more preciseness of the environmental component. And that has to do, it has a double reading in terms of economic effort. The time it could be greater, but it could be a bit more challenging for a private company. But as a country, we're trying to preserve the environment and the communities, very well aligned with the final and target objective of these type of projects, which is for them to be sustainable projects for the future of our generations to come. That's in summary. And regarding taxes, that is a topic that we're observing. We see that the market is quite open. We do not know if the best equipment will be, for example, if we look at alkaline, we don't know if we will require more grid-based energy, or if we'll have to manage energy through lithium battery systems. We don't know if the product is going to be locally demanded first or abroad. Therefore, the efforts that we're making as a company today attempt to obtain permits, licenses that allow the greatest possibility, greatest flexibility possible for making the investment decision, right? We think that we can reap the benefits of the future projects, the technical, economical feasibility, regulatory feasibility of the project we're observing, and we need to think about the taxes associated to the different configurations. And the truth is that thinking about these taxes is something that we've left for later, just to be honest. But we want to treat it in due time, and that time will be at around 2024 or 25. If we have to go and compete with countries like Saudi Arabia and others that you saw on the graph before, of course we would have to do so. But I'd say that the main drivers of the levelized cost of hydrogen is not related with tax, but the two elements that I mentioned before: the weighted average cost of capital and the level of renewable resources in the country, and how close the projects are to the sea, which is something critical. In this case, there's no global competition for solar and wind power. And regarding the closeness to the seas, where we have more than 200 kilometers of closeness to the sea. So depending on where you are, and that's the low geopolitical risk make Chile an exclusive competitor, even having deficiencies in prices in terms of market competitiveness. That does not mean that this will not help for the future. The policy like that will not help in the future. But I do not see that as an entry barrier for products to be shipped to abroad. And okay, yes, we have another question. Pablo Redondo from Musenko, Christian. One of the slides, in one of your slides, you said that you want to have one pipeline per region. What have you thought about coverage, diameter, materiality? Until which extent would you cover diameter? I'm sorry, what type of pipelines? What material would it be made of? What's the difference you need for coverage? Sorry, maybe I was not that clear in my presentation. With pipeline, I meant with a portfolio, project portfolio. We want to have not just one project per country, but a pipeline is like the structure, like the portfolio. A series of at least 1 to 2 projects per country. That was the intention of the slide. Sorry for not being that clear. We have another question here for Marcelo. From the point of view of the technology and equipment developers, we are working in Chile with renewable energy projects, which is a variable source of energy, and most of them are possibly not connected to the grid or do not have storage systems to ensure there's stable supply of energy to the stabilizers, right? Electrolyzers, which means that we will have to have more robust constructions to improve the mechanical reliability of the equipment that is exposed to this. Many times, what we seek in the processing plants is to maintain a stable operation to avoid impacts on the mechanical reliability of the equipment. How does that technological development work? Everything that Siemens is studying to make these facilities more robust, how is that related with the reduction of capex that's expected when we have to have more robust materials, facilities that are more reinforced, and how do we associate that with the capex reduction we seek? That's a broad question regarding the concepts for cost-effective projects that are also robust and resilient in terms of technology. There's many lines of action through Siemens Gamesa, which is a company that is part of Siemens Energy, and in terms of wind power. There are turbines they're creating them, and they will be disseminated, working the best way possible, technically speaking, to in parks that are offshore, right? Because you have large challenges, for example, for the park, for the wind farm to fall apart. So how do you raise that? So that has to do with digitalization, and it will let you have a very small portion of storage for example, a part that is an engine for them to be the supplier, right, of the blades. So it's software control and the different companies and equipment that can work with variability. Since we work with PEM equipment in Siemens, they, in addition to being very flexible, they have a very rapid ramp up of 30 seconds and a ramp down of 45 seconds. Therefore, that demands that the entire system that's feeding it is compatible. And that is what you were asking for. At least that's my interpretation. Yes, in the wind farms, we have 9 hours of sun, and there are projects that will be out of service, more time shut down than in service, and possibly you don't have storage. So it's cycles, very cyclical processes. Yes, I'd like to add this to your answer. The first offering chain or link has to do with the consulting area. What they do in consulting area is with energy system design, which is a methodology. They have their own software and they model applications by block and the interaction, and they solve a dynamic or a project, for example, in 20 years, many times we see projects and we see photos. We don't know how the equipment acts dynamically. What that does is it analyzes by block, by energy block. It looks for the optimized levelized cost of energy. For example, if we will produce water electrolysis, green hydrogen, so it's a levelized cost. If we go to our derivative ammonia, we'll take that example. We also take the optimized cost and the interaction between this. So what the software defines is the sizing of each one of the components and where we have to store and what we have to store, if it's convenient or not, the typology of the project. If you connect and you want backup or support from the grid, you also have certification, right? If that hydrogen will really be as green as you want it, or if it were connected to the European grid, it would give you 23 kilos of CO2 per each kilo of hydrogen produced. So that is a topic. When it's off grid, you seek you model. Okay, I produce with PV. Okay, PV and what else? I store in batteries. I re-electrify with reciprocal equipment to hydrogen, so I do cracking of ammonia again to gasify, etc. So that modulation, or the virtuous circle, that lets you know how this actually works, where you have to execute, and the type of technologies you have to use to always optimize the levelized cost, which is the approach that we must consider. Not focus on this or that, but to see what is your levelized cost and all that added to the local taxes and infrastructure. There's something here that has much burden, and it's the infrastructure that you have for the scale of the project, right? Okay, so we will take one more question. We'll answer it. No more questions? Okay. I'd like to congratulate the 3 speakers, the panel members we had today. Big round of applause for them. And as a person from Ecuadorian, I'd like to congratulate Chile for your great progress for all these development projects and for being brave enough to being the country that's the pioneer. And I hope that my country can follow your steps. Thank you very much for the invitation.